And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news, and this is Around Livingston. It's where I sit down with this gentleman. We talk about, shocker, what's going on around Livingston. So I'm going to let him introduce himself real quick. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. This is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News.
Plenty to talk about today. We do apologize, folks. We had a bit of a shuffle up here at the news, but we have moved past that. And one of the things that we're getting back to is these shows. So we're going to actually bring up two quick things real quick. First, of course, most of the Livingston Parish Mardi Gras festivities have now come and gone. Mr. David Gray was out there for most of it, what he could get to. And because it started to grow quite a bit. We've got a lot going on. So I know that you were out in Denham this last Saturday for the Crew of Denham Springs Parade. They also had a big old bash at the train station. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was 4 parades this weekend. You had the Walker. They started last year a pet parade at Sidney Hutchinson Park. So I actually went to that one also and got some photos. Just posted those today. Then there's 2 boat parades, a crew diversion, which also serves as a fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and then the crew of Tickfall, which the last couple of years they've donated money to Livingston Parish Fire Protection District 2, which is the Springfield area. So 2 causes for those 2 crews, and then the crew of Denham Springs, they held theirs. That was the second one I went to, and yeah, it was a rainy day, but luckily by the time the crew of Denham's parade started, it had pretty much cleared, but it was very cold. Very still kind of dreary, but that didn't stop people from going out there. I mean, there were pretty packed crowds out there in the Antique Village for that parade. I mean, and it was one of their biggest parades. I mean, I feel like that's been the case with the parades in Denham. Yet I remember the Christmas parade was huge, and this one was I felt like it was just as big. But yeah, so we had those photos that ran earlier this week online, and they'll be in the lifestyle section of the newspaper this week. This is a feature, just another photo page. But yeah, so Mardi Gras looked like, despite the rain, it went by relatively smooth.
And that's good to hear, because a lot of these folks put a lot of money and effort into these parades and these floats. So glad they got to get out there and throw some things, mister. So moving into the other thing we're going to mention before we jump into quite a few things, Superintendent Joe Murphy sat down with you a few weeks ago and discussed the new school board committee's proposal to put a 1-cent sales tax on the spring ballot, which is of course coming. So why don't you, of course, we want you to go back and watch that podcast, which you can at www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast, but give us an overview of what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much he kind of just went into a little bit of detail on why the school system is needing this, and we've been reporting on this issue for a while now. The teacher shortage that the school system is currently facing. And I can't remember exactly all the numbers right off the top of my head, like Mr. Murphy can, since he lives them every day. But I believe it was for this year alone, they hired 220 new teachers, which is up by about 60 from 2 years ago. This year they hired 80-something new paraprofessionals. They still have a few unfilled positions. That's just a couple examples of what they're facing, and I believe around 7 or 8% of the teachers are not fully certified. So, and he mentioned that that's starting to show in some of the school districts' performance scores. Last year or this school year, they fell to number 11 in terms of the highest rated districts in the state, which number 11, that's still a very good score, but it is a drop from where they typically have been the last few years. So as we know, this is a 1-cent sales tax. There's going to be people who are not going to support it, and Mr. Murphy has acknowledged that he understands that, and he's not trying to, I guess, he qualifies everything he's saying. He's not trying to tell people how to vote, but just giving them the information on why they feel that this is needed, because it would in their eyes, boost the salaries for give them the funds to boost salaries for teachers. So, like I said, we could go. It was a 30-minute discussion me and Mr. Murphy had. You could go back and watch it, but we'll still have a few more stories on this because that item is coming up March 25th, so it's a little more than a month away from now. So,
Sure.
and early voting is before that. So, I mean, it's right at a month away when people will be able to start voting on this. And this is the only parish-wide ballot item for the March 25th election.
And you beat me to it. I was just about to say you're about a month away from early voting. So keep your eye on that. Again, you can go to www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast to watch that sit-down discussion that David had with Superintendent Joe Murphy. Before we get into, the political climate is heating up for next fall. We've got a lot of people who have made announcements for next year. But before we get to that, having a little bit, some of you may remember a little bit of back and forth a few years ago between the parish council and the library. That was over funding for drainage. This time it is over book material. And this one's a doozy. I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah, this has been, I guess, an issue that since the summer that Livingston Parish has kind of become embroiled in a way. There are many people out there who are saying that there are sexually explicit material available to children in libraries, and that they would like to see those removed or moved to different sections. And so that's become a debate on what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what children should have access to, what they shouldn't, what they actually have access to, and what they don't have access to. Well, the parish council invited the library director to come sort of talk about the steps that have been put in place to, I guess, sort of limit children's access to this sort of material. And this came after Attorney General Jeff Landry released a report earlier last week, a 54-page report called Protecting Innocence. And this is something that he's been talking about. He's been talking about a lot over the last year. Sort of just making sure that there are no inappropriate materials available to children when they go to a public library. And he has, there are multiple legislators who are backing that. And, as we see, there's multiple or pretty much all council members who are backing that in Livingston Parish. In August, they passed a resolution asking the library to reclassify certain books of a sexual nature. So Gary Talbert, councilman for District 2, the Watson area, he invited the director over to their last council meeting. For the most part, it was a pretty civil conversation. The more of, I guess, the juicy stuff came on social media after the meeting, but basically they asked the library director what sort of steps are being taken, and actually Mr. Giovanni Teroff said that the library system has now implemented a new limited access card program where parents can go in and they can determine what material their kids have access to. That was just rolled out. There's about 27,000 juvenile accounts, and of the 27, I would say it was a little around 300 have made choices on their child's account. So this basically allows parents to go in and say whether or not they want their kid to have access to, whether it be adult material, teen material, young adult, whatever. They can choose. They have that power to choose, which Mr. Teroff said is not really different than what's already been allowed. Parents have traditionally been allowed to make those sort of requests for their children's accounts. But now this sort of just puts it into policy. And now those 27,000 accounts have been blocked temporarily until a parent makes a decision on whether or not they want to restrict anything, and if so, what they want to restrict. But this is going to be an ongoing thing. It doesn't appear to be slowing down at all right now.
Sure. Going to be interesting to see what pans out from that. And as you said, social media was quite ablaze after all that went down. Kind of interesting to see folks who there's always a difference between the folks who read the story and the folks that didn't. So going to be interesting to see how that sort of grows from here moving forward. Next, and last but certainly not least, I guess, is I was trying to think of something a little more clever. Um, the fall ballot just continues to heat up. We have, for the time being, we have our two candidates for parish president. We have quite a few people jumping into these legislative races. So tell us about some of the newest people who have made their announcement.
Yeah, this was one of the weeks that we missed doing a podcast, but Mr. Randy DeLatte, councilman, has announced that he is running for parish president. I mean, that was sort of the poorly kept secret, I guess you could say, for the last few weeks, but he made that announcement official. You drive around town, you're starting to see all the billboards go up for two people. Like I said, it's Randy DeLatte and Jeff Ard, who we did a story on that back in January and talked about it in a previous podcast, but he also announced that he is running. So those are your two candidates so far. Of course, other people could jump in there. And I guess you always have to qualify this by saying no one is officially qualified for anything yet, because that's not until later in the year. So who knows what can happen. But as of right now, these are your two candidates for parish president to replace Leighton Ricks, who, has served. This is his last year of his third term, and he has said that he's going to retire after this term ends this year. And then on the legislative side, you have two members of the Livingston Parish delegation, the House of Representatives, who announced they're running for Senate to replace J. Rogers Pope, who told you that he's planning on retiring after his current term ends, and well-earned retirement. After I looked back on something that was written on him earlier, and 60 years in public service. That is a lifetime in public service. Started as a teacher all the way now to state senator, but we'll get to that later. But the two candidates for his seat who have announced are Valerie Hodges of District 64 and Buddy Mincy Jr. of District 61. So those will be the two. Those are two candidates who have announced bids to replace J. Rogers Pope. So, as the year goes on, we'll have more election stories, focusing more on the candidates, but that's sort of the big news from that.
So, going to continue to, obviously, qualifying for that fall election is not until August, so plenty of time for people to make their announcements. So it's going to be interesting to see how many more people jump into these races, but it is going to be a packed fall ballot, very packed.
Who knows? Some people might drop out by then.
Oh yeah, you never
know. So
the water may get too hot. So we'll see how that goes. Well, thank you, sir. We do apologize to everyone out there for missing a couple weeks again. Had a little bit of a staff shuffle here at the news, but we are back at it, and we'll be back at you weekly, usually on Monday. We just had to do Wednesday this week because of my personal schedule. So, sir, if you'll introduce yourself real quick.
This is David Gray, news writer with the Livingston Parish News.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys out there for joining us for the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show. As mentioned, this is Around Livingston. It's where David and I talk about what's going on around Livingston. Plot twist. Please remember the news is on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Once a week in print on Thursdays. It's $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time.